If you look at any place where players of this game come together, like in the comment section of this video probably, it may seem as if I am flooded with feature suggestions and as if these requests are all over the place. If you actually read them though, you see that most of them are different ways to say the same thing. A feature request that I have not seen before is incredibly rare. This is a good thing because it means the community is basically telling me where they want me to go next. It's not always possible to follow this crowdsourced advice, but from the Steam review scores I can tell that players really like it when I do. So, for the final devlog of this season, what was on top of the list for this update?
For those of you new here, this is Evolution simulation game The Sapling, my solo indie game project. There are scenarios tasking you to design an ecosystem that meets specific requirements, but there's also a sandbox where you can build your own algae, plants and animals, turn on random mutations and see how they evolve. Did you know hashtags were actually invented not by software developers, but by social media users? Twitter, the company, only added official support for it when it noticed people using them to group topics during live events. Lots of apps that have a larger user base have a story like this, where users start to creatively use existing tools in a new way. It's called user-driven innovation.
And I'm proud to tell you, the Sapling has this too.
I read everything people write about their experiences with the game and also, as much as I can, watch over playtesters' shoulders when they play. And what I've seen more often than I'd like to admit is that players try to change the landscape mid-game. For example, by flattening mountains with meteorites, or by increasing the terrain height with volcanoes.
I feel like this is the Sapling's hashtag moment, so alright, I'll give you your terrain sculpting tools. But this is not only so you no longer have to bombard your world with meteorites, it's also because it really nicely fits with that other feature everyone's asking about.
Okay, how should a terrain editor work? Well, in The Sims, have you ever tried to create a hill and then tried to make it a little lower again? Or in Planet Coaster, or SimCity, or City Skylines, or in Roller Coaster Tycoon. It doesn't really matter what game you pick, you're not in full control and you often end up doing not exactly what you had in mind. But there's one game that has, in my opinion, solved it. Let me show you. I've sung my love for Tiny Glade before and I'll do it again. It's strictly speaking not a simulation game, but it's definitely a software toy like the Sapling is a software toy. But their approach to basically everything is so radically different than how most simulation games do it. It's a true eye-opener for me. To add a terrain, what you do is you first draw an area, which the game then remembers as one entity. This entity you can drag up or down, and you can also change the slope. And if you later decide you want it a little higher, or you no longer want it at all, no problem. As I've explained in Devlog Season 2 Episode 1, the terrain editor so far was based on random noise, which you can control with one seed, one number. The terrain editors in most simulation games do the other extreme and store the height of each individual vertex. By making the main unit of elevation the mountain, the Tiny Glade system finds the perfect balance between these two approaches. It's low level enough to give the player control, unlike my randomly generated planets, but high level enough to make it easy to use, unlike your average simulation game. So when a player draws, I store the location where they draw, the size of the tool at that moment, and I also store a value that represents the slope of the mountain. In my first version, when building the 3D model for a player-created world, each of the 20,000 vertices on the map checked the distance to every mountain to see whether it was inside the circle. This was quick to implement and showed that this approach could work, but of course the more you drew, the slower this system became because the list of checks to be done when rebuilding the world grew with 20,000 every time you drew something. Now the game caches which vertices are affected by the mountain, so I can get rid of the costly distance calculations entirely and I iterate over the mountains instead. The result is a tool that in most situations feels buttery smooth. But it still can't keep up if you move your cursor really fast. I guess the true solution here is if the cursor is here on one frame and here on the other, the game should assume it made this movement. But that's polish for another time. Until then, you'll get a nice archipelago. Now the mountains have been defined, or I guess they're continents in my game, you can select them and change them by moving your cursor. In TinyGlade, you do all of this with the same tool, which is elegant but also slightly limiting because it means you cannot draw a mountain on top of a mountain, or at least not without pressing keys on your keyboard. They also use the same tool to delete the mountain again simply by dragging the height all the way to 0. Again, elegant but also limiting, because you cannot make holes. When creating a planet, however, first drawing a continent and then a mountain range on top of this continent is quite a natural thing to do, as is lowering the ocean floor to create deep sea. Therefore, I am using separate tools, one for drawing, one for deleting and one for modifying, which can either be changing the slope or changing the height. As a quick side note, I've also received some suggestions to allow the import of grayscale height maps. Let me know whether you would be interested in such a thing. One major advantage would be that you could work with maps created in other tools or even games, like one of my personal favorites, Terra Firma by solo developer Garrett Robinson, which allows for the simulation of wind and water erosion. By the way, Terra Firma 2 is coming out at the end of October. Anyway, being able to change the terrain height also created the requirement that the player need to be able to see the map from other perspectives in the planet editor. This by itself was already a struggle to get right, but it also broke the code that translates the cursor position to the coordinate on the terrain. So far in the planet editor, I did this by figuring out where the corners of the map were on your screen and then check the position of the cursor relative to those corners. Now instead I shoot away from the camera and see where it hits the terrain, which is slightly more expensive in terms of performance, but it works however the camera is rotating. As you can hear, I've also added sound effects to the new map editor. By combining recordings of avalanches, earthquakes or just people dragging heavy rocks, I've made a different sound for each occasion. In most cases, the main reason to add sound effects is just what game developers call juice, meaning it makes the UI feel better because you get direct feedback on your actions. In this case though, the sounds actually do have a purpose. This is because it's not clear to everyone that changes to the steepness and the height of the landmass are two separate things combined into one tool. Now, with a separate sound for each of them, the tool is intuitive without a single word of text. While working on these tools, I realized that this was also a good opportunity to redo the volcano feature. Many players have mentioned that the volcanoes looked almost as if they were separate objects pasted on the land, which is indeed exactly what they were. Every time the volcano erupted, I made the land around it a little higher, and this was mainly to make volcanic islands possible, but it unfortunately also meant that volcanoes became more and more hidden inside a weird looking mountain. As of this update, they will start as small hills with a hole. You can now see why the ability to create holes on top of mountains was so important to me. And this hill will grow with each eruption. What I have to give up with this approach, unfortunately, is the ability to see the lava flow, as some sort of progress bar for the event. Now the volcano can have any shape, I can no longer model something static by hand like before. I guess the only way to achieve this would be some sort of fluid simulation, which I'd say is too much for this update.
Anyway, so we've discussed the draw button, the modify button, the delete button and the volcano button. But there's still one button left, and this button does what people continue to ask me. Before I explain though, as the season is ending, let me quickly say a few closing words on the update. The most important thing, it's almost there. Also, as always, I will slightly increase the price on November the 1st, so if you already know you want to buy the game, you better do it now. And speaking about buying stuff when it's cheap, until November the 1st, everything in my merch store will be 10% off if you use the promo code MOVEMENT.
On November 1 week from now, the first version will appear on the beta branch. This is how you get access to it. As always, it will be a buggy mess at first, but I will bombard it with bug fix patches in the first few weeks until it doesn't crash all the time anymore. And once the worst stuff is ironed out, I will make it available for everyone on Steam and itch. Okay then, for the final feature this update, we go back to TinyGlade, as you can not only change the height and slope of the mountains, you can also move them. It was when I noticed this that I finally had this light bulb moment for how to implement the #1 requested feature, plate tectonics.
Sure, it required a whole new planet editor, but that was already the second most requested feature, and because I was already planning an update about movement, you can see how it nicely came together in my head.
Then, during the 1-month live stream of the Planet Ride 1B, I also really wanted to increase the distance between some of the continents so the animals could no longer swim, which took away any remaining doubt. So now we can finally do stuff like create 2 separate islands, watch life evolve independently, and then move them together to see how 2 separate ecosystems merge, like in the Great American Interchange. Or perhaps you want to create Pangea, have life evolve in one continent, only to break it apart later and see the evolution go in different directions. So with this update, it's not just the animals that can move in all kinds of interesting ways, it's the world under their feet as well. One moment you design a simple sessile animal for the deep ocean floor, next you choreograph an entire planet. The time where I couldn't work on a single project for longer than a few weeks is long gone. I've been working on this for years, and with each new update, as the game grows, so does my excitement. I really hope something about this update will move you too.